how about we just start from the back all the way up to me, who you are, what you do, and what was your NLC cohort?
Okay, hi. Hello. I'm Maisha Williamson. My NLC cohort was 2017. I was like in Detroit for a couple weeks at that time and joined NLC. What do I do now? I am currently a technology consultant for a software company, software engineer, but my work that I do and I've been doing for the past 10 years is STEM education. So I help like other schools build STEM education programs. I do pop-up programs in different places. And also I help young women get into STEM careers by doing college prep for them. So that is me. What other questions? That's it? Yeah.
Cool. Hello again. I'm DeAndre Watson, chapter director here for NLC Detroit. I didn't tell you yesterday that outside of NLC, I'm a policy analyst for Councilman James Tate. I've been with City Council as a policy analyst since 2011. When I was an intern my junior year of undergrad, and at the time I was working for former Council President Charles Pugh in the same capacity as a policy analyst. In addition to NLC, I volunteer with a group called Caught Up Mentoring, which is a juvenile justice mentoring program. So I'm the team leader for Project Reentry, which is the program that goes into the juvenile detention facility in Highland Park to provide reentry services for incarcerated youth.
Yes, that leaves me. Next, how's everyone doing today? Good. Very diverse and beautiful group that we have here today. My name is Chad Rhodes, and I am a charter member of NLC. So I am not a cohort. I was on the first executive board, outreach and recruitment chair. We were kind of like that panel of folks that got pulled together throughout the city in order to kind of create this fantastic cohort and institute that we have. So I am actually, my background is engineering, so I'm a civil engineer by trade, entrepreneur by passion, and currently I am a commercial real estate agent. So I kind of operate in the realm of real estate, commercial. I do residential investment, property management, kind of like the whole bundle as it relates to real estate and entrepreneurship. So it's kind of like what I am and what I do. As it relates to, like, I've always been passionate and engaged in the city of Detroit, especially from a political aspect. I had a political action committee in which I did education, kind of like political education amongst the peer group. So it's definitely fantastic when we have organizations like the NLC in which you kind of blend, and this is a great conversation, guys, in which you blend kind of progressive in the city, kind of like where it is, where it was, and kind of like where it's going. So I look forward to having that conversation with all you guys.
Hello everyone, my name is Geneva Sharif, but feel free to call me DJ. I did the 2018 cohort. I'm also the alumni chair, so this is a shameless plug. I cannot wait in June to get you guys engaged and committed as alums. Yes, so I'll be calling you guys. I'm currently the Senior Director of Curriculum and Instruction at University Prep Schools, which is the second largest district in the city, the biggest charter district in the city. So for me, I'm formerly a principal, and my life's work is making sure that students have what they need, and that I am recruiting diverse talent that look like our students, also recognizing that our kids need windows, but making sure that they have mirrors, lifelong mirrors.
Perfect. Thank you all so much. So the way it'll go is I have a couple kickoff questions about what it means to be a Detroit progressive. But feel free, if something pops up and attracts you and you want to follow up the speaker, let's bring you all in. It's meant to be a conversation, not just spam. But I'm going to kick off with a question that we've all been thinking about, which is our identity. You know, everyone here on the panel has multiple identities, but you choose to call yourself a progressive. What does that mean to you? Why are you a progressive?
So being a progressive for me, being a Democrat, being a liberal, I think is very important to recognize like where you're centered from, and I'm centered from making sure that every human has access and opportunity to resources to ensure that they have a quality of life, right? And so thinking about that on a government level, thinking about that on a policy level, thinking about on an educational level, because that's my passion and that's the sector that I work in. But being called a progressive means donate when someone has a policy or agenda that I truly believe can impact the lives of the people in the positive, right? Knocking on doors, it means learning more, right? And I think for us, we all come from different backgrounds, but I think the core of progressivism is that you believe that every single human being deserves a quality of life. And if you believe that, you fight for that, then you're gonna do whatever it takes, right? Like when one day when you guys run for office, I'm going to give because I believe that you are gonna change the lives of the people that I support each and every day.
So me personally, I'm an independent. So when I think about progressive, you know, by definition, it's kind of like innovation. How are you coming to a marketplace and kind of providing, you know, your own internal ideology, along with kind of like looking into the future as to like kind of like what that looks like and how that translates. So I think as we melt that into politics, and for each and every one of us, everybody has a lane. You know, so it's all about doubling down on your lane and then what you contribute to the progressive movement, and kind of, because I think that everyone should kind of play different parts, right? And not only do you play different parts, but you feed into the collective and the whole, right? So before you guys got together and your strength was, you know, business, and your strength was outreach, and your strength was kind of like community organizing, you know, you guys kind of come together and say, hey, this is what I bring to the table, this is what I bring to the table, and let's kind of melt all this together and then kind of push forward whatever ideology or whatever movement we're trying to do, whether it's social, whether it's political, whether it's business oriented. So you kind of meld it together. When I think about progressive, I think about innovation. I think about how we come together collectively, you know, as a whole, and innovate and really make some change and push some issues that are dear and passionate to us.
Yeah. So for me, and I guess particularly for the city of Detroit, progressivism for me is rooted in progress. And there's a distinction to me between liberalism and progressivism. So I think that what it means to be progressive is to be about breaking the mold. And to me, the city of Detroit is a very liberal city, but I think it's very conservative on a progressive scale.
Right.
Because we've operated for a long time with this who's who mentality. We've operated for a long time with the expectation that outsiders need to stay on the outside, and that folks with different perspectives and different backgrounds and different nationalities and different cultures need to stay where they are. And that's a very conservative standpoint to me. So when I approach the work that I do with city council and any conversation that I'm having with people about what it means to be progressive in the city, I always try to infuse diversity and inclusion and expectations around diversity and inclusion in that conversation, because I think Detroit needs to change the way it operates, and it needs to start opening its doors to people who are different, and embracing those differences so that we grow as a region and as a real city that values other people's perspectives.
So DeAndre has some thoughts on this question. All right, Maisha, I have you.
We have Mr. Andrew.
I want us to give a round of applause.
All right.
This has happened to me twice in the last hour.
All right.
And I'll tell you.
How are you?
Hi, I'm doing quite well.
Good. So all we've done so far is we gave our introduction.
Okay, great.
Your name, what NLC cohort were you, and then what you do outside of NLC. And then we have one more question, which you and Maisha will answer, which is, why do you identify as a progressive? So, intro first.
Yes. So my name is Camelia Landrum. I am a part of NLC 2016, the best class to come through this wonderful fellowship program. You all have very high standards to meet, so we are excited to have you. I currently serve as Deputy Executive Director for Detroit Branch and ACP. That allows me the opportunity to manage our staff, our programming, our fundraising, Whenever we open our doors to the community, I'm responsible for making sure that our footprint is indeed deep and that we are moving forward as our forefathers have said. We've been around for 112 years. Well, NAACP in general founded in 1912, and then the Detroit branch in 1912, organization in 1909. So excited to be here today.
And so we're going to do, just to bring it all forward, Maisha and you, the question, why do you identify as a progressive?
Okay, so I wouldn't look this up, but DeAndre talked a little bit about the definition, but a progressive, one of the definitions is a person advocating or implementing social reform or new liberal ideas. But if you look up that definition, then you have to look up the definition of liberal, right? So favoring max individual liberty in political and social reform. So those are the definitions of progressive. For me, one of the biggest or earliest identities I remember of myself and of my family is being a Christian and being a follower of Christ. And following my grandfather example, who was a pastor and really had love for people. He grew up sharecropper in Mississippi. He moved to Chicago, moved his family, tried to get a better way of life. And he was very middle class, saved hard, worked hard for his money, sent all his kids to college. But he was very loving and giving to the community around him that was not like him. He raised his family in Inglewood, Chicago. I don't know if you heard of that, but it's like one of the worst communities in the city. He helped feed people, love on people, things like that. And that is one of the values I feel like as a Christian we're supposed to care about the least of these. And as a progressive, I care about the least of these. I realized that I grew up with a certain amount of privilege being from the suburbs, not like everyone else, but I'm gonna quick this story up. But anyway, but basically my passion is education and feeling like kids, not because of who their parents are or where they're from, their level of education shouldn't be hindered because of that. A lot of people who are in not liberal thinking or not progressive, they think that your family or your upbringing or where you live determines what you should have. I have this for my family, like this is who I'm concerned about. I'm concerned about everyone, and especially the least of these, the people who can't speak up for themselves. So that's what progressive is.
Great, Aisha. So I'll kind of speak through the lens of NAACP and my role with the organization. I had the opportunity to begin with them when I was 16, serving in our youth council as president, and it just kind of all came together full circle with this kind of challenge that's going on, your first profile picture and your current profile picture. So my first profile picture is us in DC fighting for the Voting Rights Act with Congresswoman Carolyn Cheeks Kilpatrick. And so my youth council members surrounding me in my current profile picture. Also in the background is my youth council members where I started, but it's my promotion to this position, which took place in June. And so I'm kind of thinking about in that progressive piece, like what does it mean to be an NAACP, an organization that's so wonderful, but also very male-dominated, Christian background, a lot of pastors. Our entire identity, kind of goes hand in hand with the Black church. And so when you're kind of fighting through, one as a young woman, so only one woman has been president of the organization since for Detroit. Only one woman has served as executive director. And knowing that, one, being like kind of fighting, there's a space for youth leadership, but there's also just people that are set in their ways. And so you have to figure out how do you make sure that we're talking about civil rights and it's relevant to our generation, but it's not so black and white as it was when the other folks were more heavily in leadership. So in that progressive space of trying to help them understand and see that NAACP's tentacles kind of have to spread a little bit so that we're able to connect with more people, get them more involved, and even though we're still fighting for a lot of the same issues, we're not doing it in the exact same way. So I feel like defining being a progressive for me is just kind of being present in this space and using my voice and the support of you all throughout the chapter to show what it means to have that dream kind of realized, even though we may be fighting in new ways and for different, some different things in a different way, we're all like on this path of what we want to see our city and how we want to see people become included. So I would say being a progressive, or how I define my identity with it, is working through some of the barriers that I feel have just kind of pushed me to keep fighting to provide a platform for everybody.
So I want to build off of that. Both you, DeAndre, Chad, you talked about progressivism in the context of moving from something old. You get a lot of resistance doing that. So whether it's in your work or in the spaces that you've been trying to implement progressive reforms, have you seen that pushback? And when you see that pushback, how have you handled it?
I see the pushback when people have learned that a certain method works. And so if it's proven, it's tried and true, we know this is how it gets done, then that's what they're gonna stick with, because they don't have time, and a lot of times capacity, to try to figure out something else or improve the process. So the pushback, of course, comes from them just knowing that it works. How you also push back, what I've learned to be easier, is when you like semi-stick new things in, new ideas. You're like, okay, well, let's at least try it this way. And then once they see that that works, they're willing to be more trusting. They'll give you more opportunities. They'll ask you what your ideas are now. You know, and so it's like, well, I think this will work, and because you have kind of that history and accountability of it working with other small things, and you get a larger platform to try it.
And if I could piggyback on that, and as we look at Detroit, and we really look at like the nation as a whole. So I got 2 points that I'm gonna make, and I want you guys to think about. One, power is never given, it's taken, right? So think about it from a perspective of either politics in the city, either your job, like anything that you're doing. You know, nobody's gonna walk up on your door and say, "Hey, you want to be the CEO? You know, we want you to take over. We want you to run everything." You have to kind of push, build, work up to that, and we've seen that here in the city of Detroit over the years. Let's say the last 20 years. If you look at the political and business power structure, individuals, once they get the power, they keep it. You know, you look at that from a political perspective, in which they stay in office until they're 100. You know, they look to die in office. There's no transition from, you know, young leadership, no succession planning. You know, it's just always like, I got it. It's my football. I'm keeping it, right? And then I'm gonna die with it. And I think that's kind of like the mentality that we have to change, and we're always pushing, because, you know, with the advent of technology, I mean, like you guys live in, you know, in a realm where it's limitless, your opportunity. You know, for the simple fact that we've had these technology jumps, right? The old guard still kind of finding a way, you know, you being born into, you know, always having 100% access from your phone. You know, back in the days, and I'm a little older, that wasn't like that. So looking at that, and then if you don't change, and I'm in real estate, so think about it from a real estate perspective. Those individuals that were sitting on top of the world 20 years ago, give you some examples: Sears, Kmart, all of those companies, you know, that did it their way, and this is how we've always done it, and didn't see the signs on the wall that says, hey, you need to be progressive, you know, within your business structure, because if you don't, you're going to become a dinosaur. No, you know, that can never happen. This is how we do it. This is how we've always done it. And they didn't implement new technology. They didn't implement all these things into their, say, storefronts. And now, they're obsolete. They're not around. Kmart liquidated. Sears is liquidated. You know, and you can think of, you know, all these like top 100, you know, Fortune 100 companies 10 or 15 years ago. They were on top of the world. But the shift came, this technology shift really changed the game. And everyone, you can look at that. Who thought taxi drivers would ever go out of business? You know? So that's something that we need to change, think about, and we constantly need to push progressive, because if you don't, then we'll start turning.
We got any taxes you need, folks? So DJ, you're in education. A lot of our fellows are interested in education. I think one of the first ways I found out that the world was conservative was through education. I kind of never seen Puerto Rican or any of the history books. What does this question mean for both you and Maisha, and you too, because you're also in that sphere? Do you see pushback?
Yeah. Every single day, I think what the education system needs is like a fresh think tank, fresh minds, right? For me, I had the phenomenal opportunity to go back to the high school I graduated from in 2016, I think. Ypsilanti High School is where I graduated, and I was a principal there, and so I graduated less than 10 years prior, and working and leading individuals who taught me was compelling, right? But they wanted to teach this very same way they taught me, right? And that's not gonna work. So when I'm telling them like, we need more technology, where kids are bored, we need to be innovative, like we need to think about their culture, think about who they are, right? Think about being a facilitator, and their response is like, you turned out just fine, but I'm the exception to the rule because I'm young, but we are my classmates. I graduated with 300 plus people, and I have a network of maybe like 30, if that, who went to college, who look like me, who went to college and who are professionals and who are not struggling. So they had to understand, like, yes, you have sprinkles of success, but let's think about and amplify the measure of success. And so for them, they think about the policies, like the unions, like when I'm asking for lesson plans, they're like, they'll call the union rep. It's like, it's very touch and go. And I think that they love their students and they want them to be great, but in the field of education, they do not want them leading them, which is very interesting and problematic.
So difficulty giving up power.
Yep.
As Chad said. So Maisha, any thoughts on this?
Yeah, so two-part a little bit. I don't have a lot of experience like directly as a classroom teacher, but like the whole pushback thing, I might be a little bit of a rebel, so like want to do things my way. Is probably why I did not stay like as a classroom teacher. I did math, 8th grade math, and none of my students knew their multiplication tables. And I did multiplication drills for the kids. And if you know anything about education right now, like that's the worst thing you could possibly do. Yes, right. But because like you should innately learn multiplication drills. But it's like multiplication drills to me, I guess it's just something that what you should know. You should just know this. And if you don't know it, like learn it, and then we'll learn the math concepts about it. But anyway, nonetheless, I did not get along with the administration, the way I was teaching the students, even though they were learning math, so I ended up leaving. And so I do like my own type of consulting and things within creative. But nonetheless, education is we really don't care about these kids. That's the bottom line as a society. So for education to have a shift, there needs to be a shift in like what our priorities are. We're more concerned about like paying basketball players or like other people than like these kids being important. Doctors and lawyers and things like that get paid well, and they should be paid well. But in other countries, teachers are paid the same as doctors. And teachers are as highly educated as doctors, but since we don't prioritize our kids, we don't put resources towards that. And I think the way that we're set up now, public funding is not going to fund these schools. I'm in a STEM space, so it's kind of STEM innovation. There's a lot of money in that. We can easily pool dollars from like companies to fund, tech and STEM education. But like there's reading, writing, things like that might not be easily funded, and the state doesn't want to fund Michigan schools. Michigan said that students aren't entitled to a high quality education. You hear that? Like, we don't prioritize these kids, and so to me, there needs to be a complete overhaul of the way we think as a society, and I guess that's the progressive thing, or the progressive part. We're not prioritizing them, and that's our future. So that shows where we put our resources.
Yeah.
Just as the everyday like classroom, right? I was trying to push my teachers, like, you don't have to give an exam for a student to demonstrate mastery on a certain concept, right? If they love poetry, if they love being artistic or whatever, allow them to express themselves. Because a lot of times, especially with urban education, we push our kids to making sure that they graduate from high school and that they get accepted to college, not thinking like, what does matriculation look like, right? We get them to college, like actually on the campus first semester, and by the time second semester gets there, they're not there, right? And not also thinking about their culture fit, thinking about like, what are their home lives like, right? A lot of them are battling so many things, and they're happy to get away, but they also have this conviction, like, I have people on my that I need to take care of, right? I have to work and I have to do those things. And so if we don't exercise and let them grapple with the tough concepts of life, they're gonna get there. We're gonna help them get there, and then they're gonna struggle and come right back.
So DeAndre, if I were to read the comment articles of the Detroit Free Press, you know, city council's democratic, obviously we're so progressive. Is that true? Right, Detroit just filled with and I put that in the context of the pushback question. You're a young progressive working in, you know, you're the Leslie Knope of progressive politics. Is Leslie Knope's journey joyful, or
You
is it tough?
You should ask my wife that question. She hears all the stuff from pillow talk. So it is. So it's tough. It's tough. When I first started, I was so idealistic about the ability to change.
Can you just go back just a little?
Oh yeah. Yeah, when I first started, I was super idealistic and hopeful about the ability to change everything. And part of it was because I was coming off of this high. So I was at U of M, I was able to do student government. When you talk about progressivism and to me, progressivism is about radical change. It's about complete overhaul. Taking something, scrapping the whole process, putting in something new that we think works for everyone and moving forward with that. And we were able to do that on campus. So I was in that mode, and I'm like, if I can do it on campus, I can go home and do it for the city. And I remember.
Sorry.
Yeah. So, and obviously that didn't happen. So when I came to the city was sliding into bankruptcy. The consent agreement was being negotiated. Dave Dean was mayor. The governor was coming in trying to snatch all of the city's assets. And I remember the very first memo I wrote, and I don't even remember what the topic was, but I wrote a memo to the mayor on behalf of the council president. And it was in that same spirit, like, oh, we're the legislative body, we're gonna change this, let's just make this happen. And the response was, actually you need to read section, I think it's 3-115 of the city charter. You have no authority. This is a strong mayoral form of government. We propose, you say yes or no, and go sit down. That's it. So I had to change the way I looked at legislative policy because I had it twisted. I just really had it fundamentally twisted. So in that context, when we talk about the ability to change the world, people come down to city council every single day. And they complain about city services, they complain about the buses not being on time, the garbage not being picked up, street lights not being on. And the reality is that city council, the legislative entity, does not have control over those services. We can ask a question for you, the same way you can ask a question. When we want to get a response to a service issue, I'm calling the same number I would give you to call. It just so happens that because I'm calling from the internal city number and they know which office I'm calling from, we get a faster response. But we don't have more authority than the average citizen does on a lot of these issues, unless there's this one particular time during the city where we actually have the opportunity to look at the city's budget. So I say all that to say that the city's resistance to change is profoundly strong. And right now, there's this huge conversation about signs. And I never thought signs would be as complicated as they are. To me, if a business wants to sign up on a building, I don't care whether it says Applebee's or Toyota. I don't really care. But this conversation about local control and sign regulations exposes how resistant to change people who regulate policies in the city are. Because we have a city planning commission or city planning commission staff that is determined to make sure that what you see around here does not change. So there's this constant battle between the interests of economic development and what we call Gilbertville, downtown Detroit, where Bedrock is controlling this landscape and doing all of this great innovative stuff. A lot of that stuff is illegal. And there are intensive conversations about how we update our regulations to allow you to play chess on the sidewalk, or to allow you to have Spirit Plaza where you can have these spontaneous civic spaces. These are very intense conversations that are happening because there are a lot of folks who've been in the city for 20 years who want the city to stay the way it was in 1960, 1970, 1980, and 1990. And you have this influx of new talent and new interests and new building owners and property owners that can see that change. And it's just really hard to get us to reimagine how we approach local policy because it requires a complete overhaul. It requires us to scrap the way we do zoning and think innovatively about how we process land use applications. That's one example.
What are you doing illegally?
Pardon me?
I was curious. What's Bedrock doing illegally?
So, yeah.
I read bios, I know we got, who's the bedrock person? Okay.
Break the law.
Alright.
Let's
Just know what's going on, man, it's Friday.
Let's table that question for time. I got an article for you though. I was on that on Thursday. I was on that on Thursday. It's okay.
Like the Democratic Party, like, you know, like especially for the upcoming presidential election, what are some things that people are working on in connection with that?
That question, we'll let go. So, we'll keep moving.
I guess like in terms of what people are getting involved in, like how, and I know that obviously like that connection, of course, but how, actually I can't think of the word. How connected are we with working with the Democratic National Party?
As an organization.
Committee, yeah,
So NLC is a non-partisan organization.
yeah,
We have no direct connection to either political party.
okay.
But we do, so I showed you our honorary co-chair. Michael Blake is one of our honorary co-chairs. Michael Blake is also one of the vice chairs in the Democratic National Committee. So there are strong connections and partnerships between individuals within NLC and individuals within the Democratic National Committee.
And doing like the independent party. I was just curious.
Yeah.
Okay.
And a part of it's selection, there's people selected to being progressive. I was on the calls for our rural caucus, but went to school in a super, rural part of Illinois, where there's a pretty close white supremacy camp, so I was very interested. And you see, they have different views. Their definition of progressivism means something different, but still, just because of the outlets that they have to express it, they tend to go to the Democratic Party.